A short time ago in a galaxy nearby, a podcast was made to inspire and entertain. Casual Space. Making space available, one story at a time. Your host with grace, Beth Mund.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show this week. It is so glad to hear from you and be back here at the mic. I took a few weeks off. We've got so much going on at the end of the summer. I'm sure you are too, with those last precious weeks and days before kids go back to school and schedules ramp up again. Change is in the air. And that's no different here on Casual Space Podcast, where over the summer, I hope you've been enjoying each and every abbreviated episode called the Summaries Series. Weren't those fun? I had so much fun talking to a few special guests, like our co-host and friend, Hannah Stanley, and talking about some very different topics, just a little bit outside of space exploration, but still related. And now I'm going to introduce to you something else that's new for this change. Way back about, several months ago, almost a year, I sat down with some incredible friends and colleagues, Christopher Key and Joshua Whitfield. And together, we pulled from the archives some incredible guests and invited them to talk to us about their space camp experience. Now, before you stop and pause and go to the next thing, I want to tell you about the pilots, the scientists, the engineers, the CEOs, and more who are on this mini-series that will run throughout the month of August. And together with Chris and Josh, we have so much fun. We laugh a lot. We ask the tough questions, but really we're seeking out what was it at Space Camp that taught you how to persevere in a space-based, science-based, or space-supportive career. And these people are phenomenal. They're really going to inspire you as well. So it might sound a little different here at Casual Space with a few more friends, but it's only through the month of August, and I'm elated to bring to you the next series that is called Through These Doors. It's the title we're using, and if you're a Space Camp alumni, you know why. We'll be explaining it in some of the future series and episodes right here, and you are going to get to hear some of the most incredible, highest achieving, inspirational guests. So let's just jump right into it right now. Please welcome my co-host, Chris and Joshua, for this new series called Through These Doors. Still right here on Casual Space Podcast. And I hope you enjoy it.
In June of 1982, the doors of Space Camp opened for the first time. Hundreds of thousands have since passed through those doors to ignite their imaginations, their passions, and their very destinies. They came with great diversity, united in spirit, to quench their thirst for knowledge and adventure. They left inspired to boldly step into their dreams, and these are their stories. Stories of the pioneers who have paved the way forward, and stories of those who continue to ensure the flames of inspiration are brightly lit for future generations to come. For all who walk through the historic doors of Space Camp, this podcast celebrates your journey. Welcome and step through these doors with your hosts, Beth Mund, Josh Whitfield, and Chris Key.
We're live. This is the Through These Doors podcast. This is Chris and Beth and Joshua and our special guest, Andrea Hanson. Hi, everyone.
Hi. So exciting to be with you all today.
Welcome to the show, Andrea. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Well, let's kick it right off. I wanted to ask you, you have such a great background. I can't wait to get into it. You currently work at NASA. So space has always been part of your path. What brought you to Space Camp?
Wow. It's interesting that you say space has always been part of my path. It was Space Camp that brought me to space and set me on this dream trajectory.
Yay.
So it was actually in college. I was a freshman at the University of North Dakota before a friend introduced me to Space Camp and what that was. And he had worked there, gone as a trainee, and then worked there as a crew trainer. And I had spent the summer being a camp counselor at camps around Minnesota and loved the idea and working with the kids and just being at camp. And I thought, Space Camp, that sounds like something I need to check out. And so it was a little later in life that I was introduced to the wonders that Space Camp are.
That's perfect. That was my experience too. I think for most of us, we either went to camp and got influenced, or we found out about camp from someone and got the invite. And I can't wait to hear, what was your first impression when you got there? And are we talking about the Huntsville, Alabama location?
Yes, the Huntsville, Alabama location. So you had your first visit to Huntsville where you fly into the airport. Actually, I drove down my first time. And as I was driving up to the center, of course, you see the Saturn V looming over the horizon, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And you're just thinking to yourself, I should pull over and look at it. But you keep getting closer. You're like, I just got to get there. And it was just truly magical to drive up to the center that I was going to have to go through a week of training and then a week of testing before I actually had the job and get a chance to figure out what was going on at Space Camp. So it was excitement from driving up to the center.
And what was it like that first week when they're training you? Are you like, I can't believe I'm here. This is awesome. And wasn't it hard to, like, you want to play, but you also had to learn so that you could teach?
Yeah. I mean, when I applied, and the stipulation was that you had to have finished your sophomore year in college to be a crew trainer. And so at that point in an engineering curriculum, it's all about the academics and studying hard. So in some respects, it was serious. It was down to business. I mean, they made it very clear that if you didn't pass these tests, that you weren't going to be hired on for that summer, and without another job lined up, you had to take it really seriously. But at the same time, it was a playground, and it was meeting new people that many of them had been through Space Camp as trainees, and others were new, lots of educators, lots of scientists, lots of engineers. I mean, just meeting people from all over the country that were there to participate in this interview process to become a camp counselor was just really exciting. And then, of course, being trained on all of the simulators and how to run the missions was part of the interview. So we got the playtime in, but at the end of the couple of weeks that we spent there, I passed the test and they hired me.
Wonderful. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. So what is one key experience that you remember from that summer?
I think about this a lot because I work with a lot of alumni and I get to ask the same question. And so I reflect on it, and it's no one particular event, but what always comes back to me is just how excellent the teamwork was across the board. And I say that the teamwork between the crew trainers, but the teamwork on the individual team assignments as well. So I was hired on as an advanced academy counselor at Space Camp. And week after week after week, we had 18 new trainees arriving to Space Camp. And there were 2 counselors assigned to that team. And by day 2, we were clicking, we were on. And just the seriousness that the kids brought to their own experience, the way that we all worked together and how they settled into this routine for the week, such that by the end of the week, I mean, they were best friends. We were all best friends. We were exchanging emails. We were focused on the mission, the simulations. We were doing great at our teamwork exercises. And it happened week after week. So just the tremendous teamwork involved in this Space Camp experience is probably one of my favorite takeaways.
So I've got to ask this as a bit of an aside. You said coming down from Minnesota to northern Alabama in an Alabama summer. What was that experience like?
I still have T-shirts from that summer that have red dirt on them because they were sweat soaked, and I have red soil all over them. It was hot. It was humid. It was a new type of environment. Talk about extreme environments. I mean, we teach that in the in the aerospace industry, but that's real life extreme environment down there. But also coming from Minnesota down to Alabama, a lot of my trainees got a kick out of my accent, and their favorite thing was to be like, say nose cone, say nose cone. So it was a bit of a culture shock. I was surprised to learn I had an accent when I arrived to Alabama.
I'm curious to know, Andrea, like being a crew trainer, I got a two-part question for this one, but first, being a crew trainer, how did your experience being a counselor, crew trainer at Space Camp, how did you carry that into your future career, what you're doing now, and how much influence did your time at camp have in your future career?
Oh, wow. You know, I'm not shy about crediting my time at Space Camp with placing me squarely in the aerospace industry. So I was studying chemical engineering. I was going to go make polymers and adhesives for 3M or in a chemical plant down in somewhere in Houston, Texas. And so when I arrived to Space Camp and started going through even the training that we did as a counselor and was introduced to the history of rocketry, to the space program at large, to, in particular, the changes, the adaptations that the human body goes through when you live and work in space, was just something I needed to be a part of. And it wasn't until my experience at Space Camp that I was even aware that that was a discipline area. That was something people studied, learned about, and worked a career in. So Space Camp had a huge impact on my professional trajectory and ultimately my life experience.
You know, and another, just a follow up to that, Andrea, because I think all of us who are really tied into the alumni community one way or the other, you're really in a really unique situation because you check so many boxes, being an alumni board, Space Camp Hall of Fame. You know, you do so you check boxes where not everyone overlaps. And I feel like you kind of overlap the entire alumni community. So you're really you're an excellent guest here in our first season of the show. But I think I'd be remiss if we didn't ask you, having touched all of it, how does the brand, how do we as alumni, how does the whole operation do better working together for the ultimate goal, which is getting kids through those doors?
So I think what you point out is that I do span so many of the alumni communities is testament to the tremendous impact that being part of the Space Camp programs as an employee had on me in my life. And it was when I was inducted to the Space Camp Hall of Fame back in 2010 that I was reintroduced to that. And it was like a missing part of me was found. And that puzzle piece just completed me and really set me on this path to being involved, not only with the Hall of Fame, but eventually the Alumni Advancement Board. I just completed a 5-year run on the board and had an opportunity to serve as chair and chair emeritus and worked with Chris through that. So that was just tremendous. And it was sad leaving the board, knowing that there's just that connection that the alumni community has and the outreach that is possible. And I'll just point to, we just saved Space Camp, and that's a huge testament to the alumni community. Everyone stepped up to make sure we did not have to close those doors that we've all had the opportunity to walk through. And so when you're a part of a community with that much passion, that tremendous breadth of skill set and energy that they want to bring back to the community because they had such a tremendous experience, it's contagious. And it's something you just want to be a part of for life. Wow. So well said. And your time on the board, fantastic. And thank you. Oh, it was awesome. I feel so grateful to have had that opportunity.
It was great working with Andrea. I actually hate that she's not on the board anymore because she's just an amazing leader during that time with us. So thank you.
Oh, way to go, Andrea. I know I left the board in great hands. So it's so fun to continue to watch the work that you all are doing. Awesome. Speaking of work that we're doing, your work is so amazing. So you're at the Johnson Space Center with the Human Landing System. Tell us what your daily activities are like. Wow. Well, I hope that everyone listening to this podcast is very familiar with the Artemis program. And that is the United States mission to return boots on the moon, the first woman and the next man to have boots on the moon by 2024. In order to do that, NASA has initiated this tremendous partnership with commercial spaceflight. And there are currently 3 different companies working on designs and concepts for that spaceship that could land on the moon in 2024. And I have the opportunity to be supporting that program and those partners through what we call the Health and Medical Technical Authority. And what that is in short is that we're the team that makes sure the astronauts are healthy, they're taken care of, they're performing well, they have all of the crew systems they need to get the job done at the end of the day and stay safe. And that all lends to mission success. So I get to be part of the team that is in charge of those requirements and make sure that they're being implemented in these tremendous designs that our commercial partners are coming up with.
So Andrea, that's so amazing. And I want to ask you all these questions, but can I just give you like 3 real quick? Were you part of the year-long study for Scott Kelly?
As a small part of that, yeah. So before I worked for the Human Landing System, I actually worked for the Human Research Program, and I am a research scientist. And so I spent a long time in the exercise physiology countermeasures lab, where I managed the lab, I conducted research, and part of our job was to collect exercise data that came down from the space station every day. And that was coming down from the treadmill, and the bike, the CVIS, the cycle ergometer with vibration isolation system, and then the tremendous weightlifting machine that we call ARED. That's the Advanced Resistive Exercise Device. So it was my lab's job to take all of that data, synthesize it into reports for the astronaut trainers that help to maintain their fitness and health and strength. So we, of course, got Scott Kelly's exercise data down, and we're able to trend that and do quite a few analytics. Even though it was just an N of 1, we were able to compare that against, a broad range of exercisers to understand what toll living in space 1 year really takes on the body, the psyche, and in your day-to-day performance.
Wow, that's incredible work. And does it help when we do exercise, extend our telomeres? Is that official?
Does it extend? Oh, their telomeres?
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting area of study. So telomeres, so what you're alluding to is the fact that the length of a telomere can kind of almost predict your lifetime. That's off the record, but just kind of to summarize what they're looking for. I can't say anything conclusively from the results of that particular 1-year study, but looking at our DNA is absolutely something that we take advantage of in trying to understand what those changes to the fabric of our bodies mean when you take yourself off the planet and put yourself in an extreme environment. And when I say extreme environment, I mean, that's not only in microgravity, that's away from home, it's isolation, it's confinement, living in a small, 3-bedroom house with 6 of your best friends and knowing that you have radiation exposure and that all these other just changes are going on, and you're away from family and friends. It's an incredibly stressful environment as much as it is an exciting opportunity. And so it's just so cool that we have little telltales in our body, like the telomeres, that can help us understand the impacts that takes on the body. Again, not my area of expertise, but certainly just a fascinating area to look into.
Yeah, which ultimately exercise is good for us.
Exercise is good for us. End of day, end of story. It's good for us.
Someday I'm going to learn that lesson.
Get yourself a Fitbit. It reminds you every 5,000 steps that you've got more to go. So
I don't want to know what my telomeres look like. So.
Do they still call it the Colbert treadmill?
They do still call it the Colbert. We call it the T2, but to the rest of the world, it's the Colbert. And that stands for the Combined Operational Load-Bearing Treadmill.
Love it.
I know a guy named Steven who thinks it's about something else.
Yeah.
Well, he helped name it, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yes,
gotta love the background.
So one of the things that's not necessarily official at Space Camp that really ties into everything we're talking about is like caring for ourselves and exercise. And you talked about our mental health too, and being isolated. And we've all gone through this COVID year as we're ending it and looking towards everyone getting vaccinated and everyone being safe and more cognizant of how we're, living and being together. But didn't we learn so much at Space Camp about the things that will require us to be healthy and well when we're exploring space, like crew cohesion and getting along with our teammates and taking care of ourselves in a way that was unique to Space Camp?
All of those things we absolutely covered. I mean, again, it was the briefing on the physiological adaptations that I really resonated with. So anyone on my team got an earful about that. But it was also, I mean, when we were running, especially the long duration missions, we would run medical anomalies and the kids had to figure out, is this due to lack of sleep? Is this due to a muscle weakness? What kind of medication would we prescribe for this? If we call mission control, what kind of information should we give so they can make a quick decision on the ground to help this medical incident? And so there was absolutely that huge component. And another really unique training feature at Space Camp is, of course, the underwater astronaut trainer, the UAT. And that's all about physiology.
You know what, Chris? I think that might be the one thing AC people are jealous of space
UAT.
Space side. Yeah. It's the one thing at camp I've never done in 15.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Andrea, did you get to do it?
Oh yeah. I mean, well, it was only available to the Advanced Academy trainees. And so we didn't get to go every week, but we had an opportunity to get certified and dive. And once you could, if there was room, if you had a smaller team or maybe not everyone was going that day, there was always a waiting list saying, let me in the tank.
Yes.
That was actually my introduction to scuba diving too, which I now am certified and have dove in really cool places around the world, thanks to Space Camp.
So thinking about that, the impact that it's had on your career, what would you, looking forward, what would you tell a future kid who is maybe considering going to Space Camp or maybe is currently at Space Camp now?
Oh man, there's so much I would want to tell them. I would sit down and talk to them for days about what they should take away from their experience. But at that age, especially those are formidable years, and all those students are in just the heart of their academic preparation, and they're thinking about the big question, which is, what are you going to be when you grow up? And if Space Camp it's going to influence those lives in one way or another, even if they don't have a desire to go into the aerospace industry, or they do. I would say every kid that goes home that week after camp sits and reflects on their experiences, and it was wondering, how can they best prepare academically for that next step they want to take, given that influence they've had at camp. And one of my favorite briefings was actually the occupations briefing. We would talk about how the space industry can connect to any profession that you are interested in. If you want to be a teacher, a baker, a candlestick maker, like you can tie that back to the space industry somehow, if that was your passion to combine the two. So what I would say is, don't focus too much on the details. There are a lot of really cool positions in the mission simulations. You're either a flight director or you're commander, you're the astronaut, or maybe you're the mission specialist and you're the scientist. What I would encourage every trainee to do is just enjoy the total experience and don't get focused on the details of the job title, but understand that your time at Space Camp is simply a snapshot of the various kinds of roles it takes to support something like a space mission. And space missions are similar to working on a submarine. They're similar to working in a school in a remote area of the world, corner of the world. I mean, there are a lot of different analogs, and Beth, you know best about living and working in an analog. So I would say, my first job at NASA was titled the International Space Station Countermeasures Operations Specialist. I never would have gone out on a job search looking for that title.
That's a mouthful.
And If I had just simply stuck to looking for engineering jobs, science jobs, research scientists, I never would have come across this. So my advice to all these trainees is, enjoy the experience, keep an open mind, because it's going to be that unique collection of academic preparation, your internships, your time at Space Camp that are going to help you land that dream job when you're ready.
So I'm really hearing you say that it's around the application, how you apply yourself into and mold yourself into whatever is needed at that moment. You've been with NASA for, I think you said 10 years, give or take. That's a long time in any one organization, but you've done more than one job. You mentioned the countermeasures. I'm not even going to try reciting the entire title because that was a mouthful, but you started out in one role. How many different roles have you been in? What all have you done? What's the breadth of that experience?
Wow. I've just been so fortunate to have such a full career in only a short 10 years. So I earned my PhD in aerospace engineering, but focused on bioastronautics and, again, the physiology and the adaptations and primarily the countermeasures. So that's where I started, was in the exercise countermeasures lab. While I did support the exercise hardware on space station, like we discussed earlier, I also had a chance to be a research scientist. So I wrote the research proposals, and generally those were focused on technology development. And that might have been a new piece of exercise equipment. That could have been a biosensor. That could have been a force shoe, a more portable platform to measure and understand the loads that the body goes through when you're exercising in space. So that's really where I started. And once I got into the space system, I started to understand it was so much more than just this one piece. And I got extremely interested in connecting those dots. And I was able to do that as a systems engineer. And I know there's going to be tons of systems engineers out there in the world thinking, it can't be that exciting, but I am here to tell you it is, because I had a chance to work with the Exploration Medical Capabilities team. And that's under the Human Research Program, where we dove into the initiation of model-based systems engineering to describe the health system and to organize it and coordinate it and make sure that we were connecting all of the requirements with the actual hardware availability, with the actual risks to crew health and our calculated risks on the loss of a mission or crew health if we didn't have the right equipment with us. And that was called systems engineering. And I had no idea that could actually be a bigger integration role than I was even previously playing. So I spent some time doing that. In that experience, taking that leap away from the research world, which was really hard, because when you spend half your life earning that PhD and doing the research, it's hard to step away and take a chance on a different role. And that's probably another really important lesson I'd want to share with our future scientists, engineers, and astronauts walking through those doors is it's okay to try something new and different and to collect those experiences. Because after my time as a systems engineer, I'm now working with the human landing system. And we're going to the moon, and I had to be a part of that. So I was uniquely qualified to take on the role that I'm in today because of all those previous choices.
Wow.
Just a real
amazing.
Real quick question, Andrea, just real quick, 30-second answer, because you've done all this through NASA, and there's all of us that are outside, and I work in a policy position in my job. And I always ask this question: what prevents us from getting to the objective? And of obviously returning to manned spaceflight, returning to the moon, getting boots on the ground on Mars. In your experience, 10 years at NASA, what do you think is the one biggest thing that has prevented us from reaching that objective since the Apollo program?
Honestly, it's a matter of national priority. And a lot of that is influenced by the public opinion. So from my perspective, I'd say a lack of education or awareness on what we can actually do, why it's so important that we go beyond, that we continue exploring. I mean, imagine if Shackleton had never taken that cruise across the ocean, we still would just be, not know what was at the poles of our earth. So it's a matter of awareness and education and public support, and going through programs like Space Camp at the young age that our trainees do just sets them on that path for critical thinking and awareness that they're going to be able to share with their friends, their peer groups, and their parents too.
That's fantastic.
My last question for you, with everything you've done, what's next for you?
What's next?
Where do you want to go?
I think about this. One great thing I appreciate about NASA is that they have us work on our individual development plans. And I keep in there just as a reminder to myself that I want to be in charge of either in a role as a program scientist or in charge of crew health for when we land on Mars. So I'm going to continue to take on the roles that will help qualify me to be in mission control when our first crew heads off towards Mars.
Excellent.
Great.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This is so phenomenal. Congratulations on everything you've achieved and everything you're about to do. I cannot believe between you and I, how many women are actively, passionately participating now more than ever, because they see people like you and other role models in the roles that they want to go and pursue. So, at Space Camp, we were given that promise, like any of you today here at camp will be on the moon years from now. And we're kind of like, oh, why hasn't that happened yet? And I think it's right around the corner, right on the horizon. And any student pretty much from anywhere can really believe that now when we preach and explain that at camp. It really is, because we don't just have the agencies and the governments. Now we have the commercial space flight partners, like you mentioned, and all of these people. So in your own role, you mentioned that you've got like these 3 competing contracts that are looking to help us design and build the human landing system. So that just proves that it takes more than just one group, one design, one idea. It really needs everyone. And that's just so well said. So now that we are older and that promise that was on the horizon is still not here with us, there are other promises though, and it does feel like it's so darn close. So what would you tell the alumni who are still actively, looking to that horizon for our space achievements and successes? Because you are right there sitting in the seat that's bringing it. And I know it's right around the corner. So please tell us that it's like 2024 is still, we're good, we're on the way.
Well, I can't make any promises, but you summarized all of that in such a great manner. I mean, it has been a promise that feels like just out of reach, but I got to tell you the promise that we're making to the mission every day on the workforce side is that we are going to get those boots on the moon by 2024. And, if that slips a year or two, that will be for good reason. And actually probably due to physics, because the right trajectory to get there is probably going to make more sense at a slightly different time point. But everything you said about the commercial aerospace industry and commercial human spaceflight industry right now, I can't help but be excited for it. And when I look, I have so many friends working at all of these companies, and we gather in virtual rooms like this to cheer them on as SpaceX launches, as Blue Origin launches rockets, as Dynetics builds a lunar lander. I mean, everyone that's participating in this industry are the ones that are going to make things happen. And I think it was just really insightful of NASA to recognize that we can't do it alone. We can't do it as a government agency, but when we do include our commercial partners, they have other resources, they have other motivations and other reasons to make sure the mission meets its target and on time. That's what commercial sectors are best at, is the bottom line and meeting deadlines. And we're here to support them, to share our, over 50 years of human spaceflight experience, to make sure that we're in those critical components, like the technical authority that I work for, making sure that we're there to say, no, this is too risky. We need this to see this change before the spacecraft can launch with our astronauts on it. And so it's just been a tremendous opportunity to see that partnership grow, and that respect between the two, the government industry and the commercial sector, in meeting that goal. That there's so much opportunity right now is, I think, what that all summarizes into. And this is the time to get excited about space exploration and to be a part of it.
Yeah. So great. Now more than ever. You're so right. And Andrea, you are not only a source of inspiration, you have forged a path for so many other people and students and even alumni who might be in the field or in the industry who are going to get on board of these new commercial programs and new spots within agencies that need those innovators and great teammates. And thank you so much for inspiring us and coming today on the podcast to share where it all started for you. Andrea, on behalf of everyone from the Space Camp alumni everywhere around the world, thank you.
Well, thank you. You know, it all started for Space Camp. At Space Camp for me. So I just can't thank the organization enough. And I just feel so fortunate to continue to be a part of it. So thank you.
Awesome. Well, that is the time that we want to give and that you're so gracious to give and be respectful of what you've already given. So is there anything, fellas, that as we're still recording for a minute, we didn't ask? Or Andrea, is there anything you wanted to share that we didn't get to?
You know, one last thing, anyone listening, especially those future trainees, they've just got to be wondering, like, where do I start? How do I get there? My first answer would be to say, ask a Space Camp alumni. That's the beautiful thing about the alumni board and the alumni community that has grown and is now accessible. You can reach out. There are lots of ways to be part of the alumni community, even before you go to Space Camp. So be sure that you are checking into all the different social media channels and don't hesitate to reach out and ask an alumni because they will be really excited to share with you and help you along your trajectory.
That's great advice. Anything else, fellas?
Just had the strongest deja vu right there. Andrea, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. And again, thank you for your patience with my technical difficulties. I love you. Thanks so much. Hope to see you in person soon.
I know. That'd be great. Nice to you guys. This was so fun.
Okay, Andrea, you're on the very short list. I'm coming to see you in Houston.
Thanks. We have so much more to talk about.
You bet.
If you enjoyed this episode, give it some stars by rating and reviewing it on your podcast platform. Embrace the space. Casual space.